Lately, there's been this pretty wild idea floating around that the United States should actually take control of Greenland. Now, I know, it sounds a little out there, but there's a whole line of reasoning behind it, rooted in a very specific take on national security and global power. So, let's unpack the strategic thinking behind this proposal. And it all really kicks off with this incredibly direct statement from former President Trump. This isn't about buying real estate. It's immediately framed as a matter of urgent national defense. This one idea, that Greenland is absolutely essential for American security, that's the bedrock of the entire argument.
Okay, so what is this national security threat they're talking about? Well, the first big pillar of the argument is this idea that there's a major vulnerability, a huge hole in America's defenses that can only be fixed by having control over Greenland.
So the thinking goes that without direct U.S. control, Greenland becomes what the source material calls a big hole in the country's entire defense setup. They're arguing this isn't just some small gap. It's a major strategic weakness that has to be addressed. And this is where things get a little more specific. That golden dome mentioned in the quote, that's a reference to the super important radar dome at Thule Air Base in Greenland. It's a key part of America's missile defense and space surveillance. The implication here is that this vital billion-dollar asset is just vulnerable, sitting there under the current setup. But, it's not just about plugging one hole in the defense. The argument then zooms out, framing the entire Arctic as this new stage for intense global competition, with Greenland sitting right in the middle of the chessboard. So what exactly is this polar competition? Well, according to this argument, it's the new frontier for global rivalry. As the ice melts, new shipping routes are opening up, and the race is on to control those lanes, those travel routes, and the huge untapped natural resources in the Arctic.
And this isn't some vague competition. No, they've got specific rivals in mind. The source material points directly at Russia and China, arguing that their growing military and economic moves in the region are what's forcing the U.S. to focus so heavily on the Arctic right now.
And just to give you a sense of the scale here, because it's massive, Greenland is a full 25% bigger than Alaska. The argument is that you just can't leave a territory that enormous in a location that critical as some minor piece on the global map. All right, so if Greenland is so important, what's wrong with the way things are now with Denmark in charge? Well, the next piece of this argument takes direct aim at Denmark's ability to manage a territory this strategically important. And this slide really breaks down the heart of that critique. On one side, you've got Denmark, described in the source as a small country with a tiny economy and military. And on the other, you have the immense size and huge strategic needs of Greenland. The point being made here is that it's a fundamental mismatch. And all of this leads to a pretty blunt conclusion presented in the source material. Because of this mismatch, Denmark simply can't defend Greenland or effectively control it. The claim is that this creates a dangerous power vacuum. From there, the argument pivots to something else. Fairness. The focus shifts to what the source describes as a financial and even moral burden being placed on the United States and really on the American taxpayer. And that really brings up a big question. If Greenland is so vital to U.S. security, and if the argument is that Denmark can't defend it, then who's actually paying to protect those American assets and strategic interests? Well, the answer, according to this line of thinking, is that the American taxpayer is getting a raw deal. The U.S. is shouldering these massive security costs for a territory it doesn't even own, and the argument frames this arrangement as illogical and just fundamentally unfair. And to really hammer home this point about unfairness, the source points to everything the U.S. has poured into European security for decades. We're talking dollars, technology, lives. The feeling expressed here is that after all that, having to also cover the security for a key asset like Greenland without any control is just asking too much. Okay, so after we've heard about the security risks, the global competition, and this whole financial burden argument, where does it all lead? Well, we get to the bottom line, the ultimate goal of this entire strategic push. And there it is, plain and simple, the final objective. The source material claims that the real American position is for the United States to have direct control over Greenland. It's not presented as a thought experiment, but as a clear, necessary policy goal. So, when you boil it all down, this whole case for U.S. control of Greenland really forces us to think about this one big question. It's an argument that says, in this new era of global competition, the old ways of doing things just aren't good enough. It frames security as something you have to own, something you have to control, not just hope for. And it leaves you wondering, In this new geopolitical game, what is the real price of security?